something we heard about years ago from the futurist Daniel Burrus. It all starts with good data, but data in itself is meaningless unless you turn it into useful information, and then transform the information into knowledge through analytics. The true value is only realized when decisions are made to implement solutions as a result of the knowledge gained. Let me show you some of the new tools and how we're putting them to work in our clients' hands. Here we are evaluating the impact of the accessorials for a client that had gotten heavily into the B2C business and had found their costs rising. You can see that residential deliveries are the largest of these charges, representing over $40K in cost. Given this, we built a dashboard to look at some of the variables that could affect these costs. Of course, there are many factors that can affect costs, and it's imperative to set up the right measurement sticks. You can see here we have a thermometer we built over on the left to capture cost per pound, a dial to the left which shows the average weight per shipment, a dial to the right which shows residential shipments as a percentage of overall shipments. And this is captured over a 3-year time frame. Well, in order to look at it deeper, we wanted to drill down into it. So the first thing we did is we looked at the year 2007, and you can see where our costs were. Our average shipment weight was around 20 pounds, and our residential deliveries were running about 50%. 2008, costs had come up substantially, and the shipment weight had remained the same, but residential shipments were starting to climb. That had a huge impact. By 2009, costs were way up. Shipment weight still hadn't really moved, but the real difference here was the residential delivery percentage. So this is the sort of dashboard that we can make on a custom basis on behalf of clients. Our next dashboard was built as part of a network design study. This client felt it would be beneficial to add a second distribution center on the West Coast to support his business west of the Mississippi. Our study showed that the second DC was not necessary at the time, but since the business is growing steadily in the West, this dashboard helps to determine when it's time to study the decision again.
Kirk, I know there are a number of other topics you'd like me to get into today, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. What I'd like to do is put up on the screen, and let's ask the audience which of these topics they would like to get more information about. Network design, benchmarking, inbound logistics, reverse logistics, claims management. What the participants can do is select one or as many as they would like to get more information about. Now, Kirk, can you wrap this up so we can take some questions from the audience?
Sure, Ken. One thing I'd suggest to our audience is to take a shot at that self-diagnostic and see how you're doing. Determine where you need to improve and what you can do in-house versus what you need to outsource. I hope I've convinced you that although costs are likely to keep rising in the near term, there is something you can do about it. There are measures you can take today to offset and even reduce your logistics costs and drive towards best-in-class performance. This graph depicts supply chain cost as a percentage of revenue across a broad representation of industries. The green bar represents best-in-class performance, while the blue bar represents median results. You can see, regardless of industry segment, best-in-class companies are spending half as much as median performers. Worst-in-class performers need to be updating their business plans or their resumes. And unless the median company has a proprietary position or a distinct competitive advantage, they won't be viable long-term. Driving toward best-in-class performance is critical to your success. At Cohn Logistics, we believe that conscientious finance managers recognize that an efficient supply chain can be, and is often, the difference between the success or failure of an enterprise. To paraphrase Dr. Hao Lee, the renowned professor of supply chain at Stanford University, the marketplace of tomorrow will be dominated by those with the best supply chains today. Are you confident you have your house in order? If not, please give us a call. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Okay, Kirk, let's take a look at and see what kind of questions we got from our audience. And I've got a couple of them here, and I'm going to fire away. First one, what was what was the significance of the carries changing the dimensional weight guidelines for 2011?
Well, that's a great question. Whoever posed that one is obviously heavily involved. Both UPS and FedEx changed the dimensional weight programs for the new year. They did two things. One is they started including dimensional weight on ground packages, which they hadn't done previously. And secondarily, they changed what they call the dim factor. For those who aren't aware, kind of a simple way to explain it is most carriers are charging you based on the weight that you ship. And you can imagine if you ship 100 pounds of ping pong balls versus 100 pounds of bricks, it's going to take up a lot different amount of space in the truck or the plane that it's being moved on. So since there's only so much room in the truck or the plane that it's moving on, 100 pounds of ping pong balls may take up, a third of the plane. 100 pounds of bricks will take very little space. So they have a dimensional weight factor, which if it doesn't come up to a certain weight, they actually change it. So they take the length times the width times the height, and then they divide it by a factor. In this case, it was 194 for domestic transportation. It's now moved to, I believe, 166. And in the case of international transportation, it moved from 166 down to 133, 139. Thank you to the bird. So things are changing dramatically there. If you think about the impact that has on product that you're shipping, count on the fact that 15% more of the products that you may be shipping now may be qualifying for dimensional weight, and the charges they're charging you are based on the dimensional weight, not the actual weight of the shipment itself. So by putting those things in place, they kind of snuck it in. In fact, they didn't even include it when they passed on we're taking a 5.9% increase at the beginning of the year. They neglected to mention the fact they're also changing the dim factor. So for a lot of shippers out there, you might be looking at your budget so far year to date and saying, how can I be 10% over where I thought I was? I thought I factored it all in right. That may be the reason.
Okay. Got another question for you. Is there an industry standard for reviewing the design of my distribution network?
Well, there's certainly things you can do. If you're every so often you should certainly take a look at where your warehouses are, where your distribution centers are, where your manufacturing facilities are, based on what your strategic direction is as a company. Are you trying to be the least cost provider? Are you trying to provide the highest level of service? Someone trying to provide the highest level of service might need 6 or 8 distribution points around the country to provide 1 or 2 day service to any point. Someone trying to be the least cost provider may only want one facility somewhere in the Midwest to service the entire country with a low cost. So it also has to do with where your customers are, where your suppliers are, and ultimately what those transit time requirements you have are. So we believe that it's one of the most strategic decisions you can make, and while many companies will spend a lot of time trying to simply reduce cost of transportation year over year, the strategic decision about where to put your distribution centers can be a decision that saves a lot more money and has a lot more impact longer term, and is one that should be looked at every several years.
Okay. Another question. What are the advantages of doing a benchmarking study?
Another good question. The whole concept of benchmarking is seeing how you're doing against others within your peer networks. And when I say peer networks, some of your peers may be people within your industry segment. It could be companies of the same size that you are. It could be companies in the same region that you are. It could be companies that ship a product of a similar value per pound that you ship. So if you think about it, for most companies and most CFOs, most senior financial people would certainly like to know how they're doing against their competitors, because as that chart showed, if you're not driving towards best-in-class performance within your industry segment, you're going to be left behind. So at Cohn Logistics, we rely not only on our own data for this, but we have several major and internationally recognized resources that we call on to get information to establish benchmarks for you against, again, that peer network we were discussing.
Great. Another question. I have often wondered if my warehouse operation is as efficient as it should be. How would I know?
Well, sometimes, doing all managing by walking around is a good idea. I can tell you that in many cases you'll just walk out and see things that you know don't make sense. We've been in operations from bakeries where people are carrying individual pans of rolls back and forth multiple times across a production area. It's pretty easy to recognize where there's opportunities for improvement. We think that it's important to recognize that you really need outside support to do it and do it properly. A good independent outside provider coming in and evaluating your warehouse facility, looking for efficiencies, talking about scalability, seeing if the things that you're doing today will allow you to scale to the size that you need to be long term, that you're achieving the strategic goals that you intend to, we think are critical. So if you are interested, I think please contact us, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about a warehousing study.
Okay, that's great. At this point in time, we are going to go into our final polling question. Okay, we are back. We have one final question that was just submitted. That question is, why hire a consulting company and then hire a transportation management company in addition?
Well, good question. Frankly, at Cohn Logistics, we say transportation management and logistics management first, and consulting second, because we really take an active role working on behalf of our clients. But we would suggest in the case of Cohn Logistics, you don't have to. You can get two for the price of one. So I'll stick with that answer.
That's a great answer. Well, at this point, Kirk, I would like to thank you for this interesting and timely presentation of how logistic trends are impacting bottom line performance. Again, for those of you in the audience interested in getting CPE, we will be sending out evaluation forms, and you can return them to us. In addition, if you need to contact Kirk with any additional information or questions you may have, certainly feel free. And I want to thank everybody for participating in this webcast. Have a great afternoon.